I'm Emily Rooney. This is Beat the Press on Contrarian Boston. I'm joined here today by Contrarian editor Scott Van Voorhis, Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University, and Lylah Alphonse, Boston Globe editor for Rhode Island and New Hampshire. Our topics today. So, what happens when thousands of journalists are present for one of the biggest news stories of the year? The double standard debate. A journalist loses her job while a coach keeps his. Governor Maura Healey's attempt to regulate use of social media for minors, and at the same time, social media influencers spreading garbage are getting rich. And our panel's rants and raves. First, the salads had just been eaten at the White House Correspondents Dinner when gunshots rang out, thousands hit the floor, hordes of security moved in, and CNN's Wolf Blitzer, who had just taken a restroom break, was there an eyewitness to it all.
It was scary. I was a few feet away from the gunman as he was firing. It was loud. It was scary. The cops got on top of him, and then they got on top of me to protect me. And then they took me away into a secure room, the men's room. It was just a frightening experience.
Within the hour, the media was present, black tie and gowns, for a White House press conference.
A man charged a security checkpoint armed with multiple weapons, and he was taken down by some very brave members of Secret Service, and they acted very quickly.
Dan, I'm going to start with you because you don't usually watch the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but I understand your wife said, "Hey, Dan, you might want to tune in now and see what's going on." So, what was your first impression?
Well, I mean, I'm smiling, but this was not a good event. It's certainly nothing to smile about. I tuned in CNN, and I know Scott's going to talk about Wolf Blitzer too, but the very first thing I heard was Wolf Blitzer calling in and telling what had happened from his perspective. And we have since learned that as horrendous an event as this could have been, the security, in fact, was not breached. It held pretty well. And Wolf Blitzer was the first person that we learned from that the shooter didn't even get to the same floor that the event was being held at. So obviously they're going to have to rethink all of their security protocols just to make sure that everything is nailed down as well as possible. But they seem to work pretty well in this case. And
Yeah.
just to see the reporters running around and then the news conference later, it was really quite an evening. And of course, it could have been quite a tragic evening.
Yeah, my
And we're
nephew
all
was there.
glad that it wasn't. Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
he's the Pentagon producer for ABC News, and so he stood up, and I actually have some video. Maybe Tony will roll it in of, and just started videoing. I mean, because I don't think he felt really fearful. I mean, he said one of the scariest things was the fact that these security people, and some of them dressed in, full military regalia, were like throwing people to the ground, dragging people out. One woman in a sequin dress gets dragged out into I mean, they were trying to protect people, but, and at the same time, almost virtually everybody in that room knew it was a big story and started calling in or doing whatever they had to do. But, as you know, Scott, this has also prompted a whole slew of crazy conspiracy theories. There are many, many people. I talked to a couple of people in an event this week who don't believe a word of it.
Sure. I mean, it happened after the Butler assassination attempt, and it really is par for the course now. And you do get these conspiracy theories just taking off immediately. There's also a debate over the security, and to Dan's point, a lot of things did work, but Trump is using it to push his new ballroom. It just doesn't quite make sense, but idea being that it'll be more secure, but would you even have an event like that there? I don't know. But it is taking on a kind of a partisan tinge to it, where the Fox News Republicans are saying it wasn't secure enough. This is why we need the ballroom. Wall Street Journal had a pretty good article, and I trust they're reporting more. I mean, it's a legitimate issue to look at the security, but if it gets all wrapped up into Trump's ballroom argument, I mean, what do you believe at some point? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not a security expert. The journal said you could just have a paper ticket and you can get through the first line. That seemed a little loosey, but goosey, but who knows? I mean, it's hard to, I mean, it's hard to plan for everything, right? So
So, Lylah, you've been to this event before. You weren't
Mhm.
there this time, but the Globe obviously had a whole team of people there, including your media reporter, Aidan Ryan, who wrote a great recap piece on that. But just walk us through what's it like being there, and can you imagine yourself being in that situation where all of a sudden you're at a party, you've probably had a drink or two, and suddenly, because there was a pre-party, as you all probably know.
There are many pre-parties.
Oh, I know. And then all of a sudden there you are, and it's a huge news story.
It is. So it's been 10 years since I was last there. So take that for what it is. But you do show a paper ticket to get down the first set of escalators. And those things are really would be tough to forge. I mean, the last one I had holograms and stuff on it. But it is a hotel. People are staying at the hotel. There are other things going on at the hotel. So there's you can walk into the hotel and you can grab a drink at the hotel bar or the cafe in the lobby. And there's no strange security there. Once you go down the first set of escalators, there's a second set of escalators. And last time I was there, there was then that's where the metal detectors were, and then you had to go through those to get to the ballroom. And so I think what Dan said about security working the way it's supposed to, it did. It worked the way it was supposed to. The shooter tried to access the ballroom and did not. But the talk about this turning towards the need for a White House ballroom, I think it's important for people to remember that the White House correspondents do not work for the White House.
Right.
This is an event that would never be held at the White House because the organization that holds it is not part of the government. They're independent. It's about freedom of the press. And so they can create an absolute bunker at the White House, which is what they're trying to do. That's not where this dinner would likely be held. Trump does not control its location. I also think that with the conspiracy theories, I'm not surprised that they came to life and really took hold so quickly. Trump has really developed a bit of a boy who cried wolf problem. Um, Between the wider lens picture you're seeing out of Pennsylvania with the crane lowering a American flag into the shot and people ushering the journalists in to get the perfect camera angle, and the MAGA base now having a lot of skepticism around that. And then you've got the constant back and forth announcements about the Strait of Hormuz being closed. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, they've accepted our offer. Oh, no, we never gave it to them, and the market manipulation that goes along with it. I think people feel that this is just another incident of that, especially since, and this is probably the most important point, Trump immediately controlled the messaging. He immediately, before he was even ushered off the premises, was posting on his Truth Social that the show must go on.
Yeah.
So there's an immediate reference to reality TV and performance and optics. And then to host a press conference, it's a 37-minute walk from the venue to get to the White House after that. So to have people getting outside the shut down roads and into Ubers or hoofing it all the way there in their finery, that's also him controlling it.
Yep.
He didn't have to do it within half an hour. He could have made it a little bit easier for people to get to. But then the talk of the partisan talk and the talk about security and the talk about the need for a ballroom, all of that undermines the seriousness of the situation, which is that a lot of people were at risk, and luckily security worked as it was supposed to, and they are safe.
Good point.
Emily, can I make just
Yeah,
one other
please.
point? And that is about, print newspapers are dinosaurs.
Yeah.
We all know that. But the New York Times apparently has an 8 p.m. deadline for their Sunday edition. And the front page the next day had absolutely no mention of the shooting. And, I understand they're a national paper. They've got printing plants all over the country that they don't own. But the fact is, they do own their own printing plant in Queens. And apparently, it didn't even make it into any of the New York editions. Now, it was the lead story in the Boston Globe print edition, the Washington Post print edition. Uh, even though print isn't that important anymore, I think they ought to be able to loosen up their print deadlines a little bit for something this important.
So true, Dan. I was shocked. I do get the Sunday New York Times. I don't get it every day. I subscribe. I get the hard copy. I was shocked that they didn't have it. And then I thought, oh well, it's just a suburban edition. And then I read your column and I thought, oh no, not just us. It was everybody. So I agree. Shocking. And it seems to me at this point they just don't care because they've got their digital version and they figure people will just tune there and that's it. But good point. All right. Well, at first, Patriots coach Mike Vrabel claimed that the photographs published in the New York Post of he and NFL athletic reporter Diana Russini were innocent, and he said it was laughable to think otherwise. But then, when the New York Times, the parent company to the Athletic, set out to investigate, well, Russini suddenly resigned. And then, of course, more photos from as far back as 2020 appeared also in the New York Post, and then no one's laughing now. Rossini undoubtedly crossed the line for sure, canoodling with somebody she covers. But what about Vrabel? So here's Vrabel at the NFL draft.
But I take accountability for my actions and the actions that caused a distraction to the people that I care most about.
Starting with you, Lylah, I'm sure you've read, Ben Bolin in the Boston Globe did a great piece where he named names and pointed fingers at various reporters at ESPN, at NFL Network, saying, "Hey, these guys do things like send $700 coffee pots and chocolates in the thousands of dollars to people they cover. They invite them over to their houses for pool parties, with no consequence. It's a conflict of interest, but it's kind of under the table, and everybody goes along with it. There's no question that Diana Russini crossed the line. I mean." Denial was also a mistake. And that's also where I say Vrabel is not innocent. He lied. One way or another, he lied. And it just doesn't seem to matter to the NFL. I mean, domestic violence doesn't matter.
So, sports commentator Colin Cowherd had a really good point. Cowherd, rather, had a really good point. You've got moral failings and you've got ethical failings, and you can't really confuse the two. Russini was punished for a failure of journalism ethics. Vrabel is being taken to task for a moral failure, basically cheating on his wife. But the level of punishment, the level of censure, those are two different things. Like what Vrabel did was not a conflict of interest, right? So as much as I hate to say it, he's not going to be punished for having a conflict of interest that made it easier for his team to get coverage or made it harder for him to do his job. But what Russini did is a conflict of interest, and it's against journalism ethics. What she did was wrong. I think if a male reporter was caught kissing someone at a singles only resort or canoodling in a hot tub, we'd be having a very different story for some reason, because while spending $16,000 on chocolates for 150 different sources is ethically questionable. Like, at what point does that tip over into something that looks like a bit of a bribe? But there's no moral failing there, so people are willing to give it a pass. I think when you're a woman, when there's sexuality involved, when there's the appearance of impropriety involved, you're judged in a different way. I don't think it's right, but I'm not sure this is a double standard only because I think we've got apples and oranges. The double standard is really Russini versus her male counterparts in journalism, not Russini versus Vrabel.
Anyone disagree with that? Scott, what's your take?
No, I endorse
Yeah.
everything Lylah said, and she made some of the points that I was going to make. When I was talking about this with my students, we all agreed that the distinction that Lylah makes is absolutely on target, which is that they both acted immorally, allegedly, but only Rossini acted unethically by violating the rules of journalism in her workplace. I think that the point about how the NFL handles these things is really worth keeping in mind. I mean, last winter, there were two Patriots players who were accused of violence against women, and the only thing anybody seemed to care about is, oh well, we hope they'll be able to play in the next game. And and you look at the Celtics a few years ago, different sport. Joe Mazzulla's predecessor as coach, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name, he was caught up in some sort of a untoward relationship,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
and he was hustled out of there immediately,
Mhm.
which shows that this isn't necessarily a sports thing all around. It may be specific to the NFL.
But what about
But
lying, Scott? Does lying doesn't matter? I mean, and we don't know what else Vrabel shared with Russini. He could have been talking about personal things about players. We don't know, but we do know that he lied.
well, I wonder. There's also the behind the scenes. I mean, people know a lot of what's going on. You have a lot. I mean, it's a small industry. There's not that many people in it. People kind of know, have a sense of who's dating who, who's doing what, who's really well connected. You know, the fact that she developed Vrabel as a source at some point is really good for her, you know, for her job, right? The fact that it crossed over at some point into a relationship is like human nature, right? I mean, this stuff happens. But I wonder whether I'll think a lot of this stuff goes on, and there's a lot of but it doesn't, if it doesn't get called out, right? If there's somebody's, you know, not if most things don't end up in the New York Post, right? Or relationships. But I think people are rewarded for getting good information, getting inside information. But that brings in its risks, I guess, as
Mhm.
well. And it is unfair. I mean, yeah, if he was I think Lylah brought a great point. You know, if it was a male reporter, what would we be talking about? You know, she is judged more harshly, but on the other hand, you can't, you know, it's great to develop a source. It's not good. You can't have a personal relationship with them. It doesn't work.
Lila, one other question I had for you. Another one of your colleagues, Adrian Walker, wrote about questioning who's doing this anyway. Where are these leaks coming from? Do you think that's salient? Is that something that we should be able to find out? Because it looked like, in terms of the first photographs anyway, that somebody was out to prove a point about Russini anyway, that she was having some kind of a relationship with Vrabel. I think it was, for some reason, I think she was targeted and not him. I could be wrong about that, but does the source matter, do you think?
I think I'd be curious about the source.
Yeah.
And I think that when you get to a certain level in any industry where you have information or access to information that other people don't, you could be targeted. So I think it's much more likely that there's someone who wanted to take Rossini out than there is someone who wanted to take Vrabel out.
Mhm.
Because this kind of affair, if that's what, I mean, that's a bad word to use here, this
Yeah.
kind of alleged relationship, I meant incident,
Yeah,
this
I
kind
know.
of incident is something that would not be a career ender for a major NFL coach, but it is something, as a journalist, once you've been ethically compromised, it's really hard to come back from that and still be a legit journalist. There
Yeah.
are other things you can do, right? You can start your own like talk radio show where you have all the rules and you can become a commentator or something else, but it's hard to stay as a legit journalist once you've been
Yeah.
compromised. So there's incentive for her competition to compromise her more than there is for him.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened with Olivia Nuzzi, the woman who had the so-called digital affair with,
Mhm.
Robert Kennedy, and she lost two jobs.
Yeah.
New York
And
Knicks.
there's jealousy, right? I mean, she also was getting stories other people weren't.
Yep.
Right.
And also, but but you know, clearly crossed several lines there. So
But it's that thing when you get information, you should be skeptical. I mean, for us, it's trust but verify, right? And part of that verification process and that trust process is asking, why does this person have this information and why are they giving it to me?
Yeah.
And I think that's what Adrian's really getting at there.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, Governor Maura Healey is proposing legislation that would curb social media use for minors. She wants a time restriction, age verification, a 2 hour a day limit, and an end to infinite scrolling. Here are some of her proposals.
Social media accounts will be required to have default settings that will limit platform use to 2 hours a day. They'll deactivate addictive features like infinite scrolling, autoplay.
So meanwhile, while Healy is trying to legislate addiction, others are actually just feeding them. We've got people like influencers like Nick Fuentes, who's a far right hate monger who says things like, Hitler was cool. he's amassing a fortune, collecting about $900,000 from 900,000, yeah, from 11,000 of his followers in just a year. But this has really been happening for years because we all remember Alex Jones from InfoWars. You know, he was the guy who claimed that the Newtown mass murder didn't happen. He made as much as $165 million in 3 years. I get a kick out of the fact that the Onion has now purchased InfoWars. But you know, starting with you, Lylah, you follow this much more intricately than I do. Just briefly on the Healy legislation. Do you think that's going to go anywhere, or is it a government overreach, and is it not realistic? It's like taking cigarettes, away from kids. You can't buy them, but you can still smoke them.
So that's a good point, but this isn't just Massachusetts. Connecticut enacted legislation like this in 2023, and they've been followed by, I actually wrote it down, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Maryland, Minnesota, Ohio, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, Utah, and California. Ohio, Arkansas, Utah, and I'm sorry, Ohio, Arkansas, and California. It's the legislation's kind of pending. It's been blocked by the court there. Florida already bans kids under the age of 14 from being on social media at all, requires consent from parents for 14 and 15-year-olds, and then there are restrictions for 16-year-olds. So it may be government overreach, but Massachusetts isn't the only government that's doing that. A lot of what she's proposing are really common sense things that parents should be able to control, right? You should be able to control how much time your kid can spend. You should be able to control what they see. We have blocks on cable boxes, right? You can block certain channels. You should be able to do that elsewhere. I think the influencers things is separate but related issue. There have always been influencers for various things, whether it's get ready with me in the morning or kids who are now spending hundreds of dollars at Sephora for products to prevent aging, which at age 9 you don't need. But the amplification of hate, unfortunately, I think that's just a human issue. And I think if you block it in one way, it'll crop up somewhere else. Whether you're leafleting and having flyers, or whether you're encouraging people to, fund your GoFundMe after you've said a racial, horrible racial slur at a little kid, which also has happened. So that's it's tough to not amplify the hate and also restrict the kids. The hate mongers aren't always aimed at the kids either. They're aimed at the adults who have money.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Dan, because wasn't it Meta that several years ago, said they were going to legislate against lying and not put things that were untrue on their various feeds and stuff. But I mean, like, we've been seeing this for a couple decades now. I mean, like, people getting rich off of spreading this kind of garbage, but you can't really legislate it. I mean, that's why there is sort of a connection here, like legislating what you can read or what can you consume. But what about some of the stuff that has no legislation?
Well, I mean, some of this can be legislated, and some of Governor Healy's proposals, I think, make some sense. I think that the infinite scroll and the autoplay videos are a problem. An even bigger problem is the aggressive use of algorithms to keep you glued to that digital device. And the way that the algorithms keep you glued to that digital device is to keep showing you material that makes you angry and upset. But one of the big problems with her legislation is the age limit. Um, First
Too
of
high.
all, the enforcement of this is going to be almost impossible. But second of all, the internet in general has become an important outlet for kids who are marginalized to connect with like-minded kids. This has been especially true in the LGBTQ community, but also kids who are neurodivergent. Um, it's that aspect of it, I think, is going to end up doing some harm if this ever passes. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like the legislature ever passes anything. So maybe this will join the rest of the scrap heap bills.
Scott.
Yeah, no, I think that it's election year, right? This is a good issue for Healy to jump on. And I think parents are rightfully upset about it. I mean, I had kids who've gone, now they're in their late teens, early 20s, but it was like, didn't know what hit them, right? I mean, the things that I was worried about, like, they're going to be drinking or whatever, weren't the things that were actually people are getting involved with and potentially causing a lot of mental health damage. So I empathize with or sympathize with the motive here. Whether, the Massachusetts legislature has a terrible track record of passing anything, so I doubt that, it's hard to see that would get through, but it's good to have a debate about it. I mean, it really is. It has really been a disruptive force for kids, but it also has been at the same time. I have another kid who met other kids, developed friendships, during COVID where you couldn't go anywhere. And so in that ways it's good. So there's got to be a ways of accentuating what's constructive and maybe putting a little damper or trying to put a damper on some of the more destructive elements of
But it just seems
social
to me that
media.
actually full-grown adults are the ones who have been more disturbed by it. I mean, I understand legislating for children, not adults, but all these wackos, that
Yeah.
they follow through on all these conspiracy theories that they see online, and they
Oh, sure.
the pizza guy and pedophile in a pizza parlor. I mean, people believe this, and that's when I say there's no legislating spreading lies. It's
No,
legal.
you can't.
President
But
does
you
it.
but minors it's a different
I
category,
know.
right? I mean, parents do have some element of, control or need to be able to guide them. And but yeah, it's a lot of adults go way off into the fringes, um, you know, following different influencers or getting involved with different groups that aren't good. Um, I don't know how you solve that, but it's sort of like the whole media world has been upended, right? Where anything gets published and, and we just live with it.
But let's not forget that Section 230 protects all internet publishers from any liability for anything that their
Section
users
230 of what?
post. Is Section 230 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. I'm so glad you asked, Emily. And this is a powerful, powerful protection for these tech platforms.
Mhm.
And in return, we should demand, at the very least, that they use algorithms responsibly. I think that if you have tech platforms that are not going to use these algorithms responsibly, you could either modify or even remove the Section 230 protections that they currently have.
All right. Okay, time now for our rants and raves. All right, starting with you, Dan. What's your rant or rave?
I have a rant for this truly awful podcast that the New York Times put up about a week ago, in which they had the host and two guests endorsing what did they call it? Micro-looting.
Micro.
And you had these very elite effete members of the media class endorsing the idea of, well, it's okay to steal from Whole Foods and other big box stores because they're corporations and corporations are evil. And they were even talking about the murder of that healthcare executive, Brian Thompson. And they weren't endorsing that, but they were kind of saying, well, I can really see why some people were sympathetic to that. It was really just terrible. And we do need to name names, so I'm going to have to look at my notes here. It was political commentator Hassan Peer, who's become something of a celebrity, New Yorker writer Gia Tolentino, and the host, Nadja Spiegelman. It was, I listened to the whole thing and I was just appalled from start to
I
finish.
couldn't get through it all, but it was, I agree, revolting. All right, Lylah, what do you got?
So I have a cautious rave for TMZ for opening up a Washington, D.C. bureau. There's something that's just really amusing about them chasing like Lindsey Graham down the halls and then not asking a policy question, but asking him about holding a bubble wand at the Magic Kingdom. There's something interesting about them, buttonholing Ted Cruz and asking him questions that really don't pertain to policy or wonky things. But really, for me, it's the acknowledgement that DC has become kind of a scripted reality TV show, or semi-scripted, the way Trump treats everything like it's a production, controlling the messaging. The show, you have had press conferences with stacks and stacks and stacks of bound, what they say are studies that are actually full of blank pages. It feels like it's time someone acknowledged if it's going to be treated like a reality TV show, it should be covered like one.
Yeah, good point. I think Grindr sent somebody out to Washington too, didn't they?
Grindr's different because they've become a social media platform instead of a dating platform.
Oh,
They
okay.
held a party at the White House Correspondents' Dinner before a pre-dinner party
Really?
aimed at
Hmm.
LGBTQ legislators and journalists. And so they're not really covering it as much as they're capitalizing on it.
Okay, good. All right, Scott, what do you got?
I have a rant for the BBC about its coverage of the Iran in general and the Iran war. It's come under fire from the former head of the BBC Persian service, Sadek Saba, who complains on a couple of different fronts. One is that they've held the BBC has a long-standing agreement with the Iranian government, where when they send Lise Doucet, who's a great reporter, to do reporting in Tehran, the stories don't go on the BBC's Persian service. So that's number one. They're getting out there to UK, US, wherever else the BBC is broadcast, but they're not. You can't hear it. And of course, you get into the technical questions with, could you hear it anyway? Did they jam it? So forth. But it's still, he thinks it's a big issue. And he feels that their coverage has been kind of a mechanical kind of, we have to show both sides. In his view, is downplaying, or at least wasn't tapping into the outrage that people feel towards a tyrannical regime. It's a tough situation. I think other news organizations have done similar deals, but it's also like, well, it can be manipulated. As Saba pointed out, that you're interviewing somebody in Tehran, they're going to be very careful what they say, or you're interviewing people that who knows where they're what the motive is. So, and with social media, with technology, you can cover it's in some ways you can still cover, is he saying, Iran without having to go and do kind of the dog and pony show that the government might want. So that was my thing.
All right, good point. All right, well, I have also a rant for mostly local television because that's where I saw this story about this breathless reporting about somebody who self-reported that they had measles. They came through Terminal C at midnight at Logan Airport, and then I guess reported themselves that they had measles. It felt very political to me because, I mean, many people come through. I sat next to somebody who I'm sure had the flu on a flight, but you're not. More people are going to die of the flu this year than measles. But it felt, as I say, political because there's so much tisting now over people who don't get vaccinated. And I know there've been a lot of breakouts, especially in the South, and I'm not minimizing it, but they then followed up with doctors on the set. What are the chances you could be infected? He said zero. I mean, virtually zero. And it was actually the lead story for like 2 days in a row that one person had measles. And we don't know whether it was a child or an adult. And I don't know who to tisk on that, but I thought it was outrageous. And I noticed the newspapers didn't do the same thing. It was mostly local TV. All right, that is it. And that is it for Beat the Press. You can catch us on Contrarian Boston, of course, or on YouTube. Our thanks today to Scott Van Voorhis, Dan Kennedy, Lylah Alphonse. I'm Emily Rooney.